Jai Hind to all. Today, myself Shikha Agarwal, Assistant Professor in Department of Information Technology in Ajay Kumar Garg Engineering College. Today, we are going to discuss one topic of cloud computing, that is resource provisioning. The subject code for the cloud computing is KCS 713, and this lecture is being beneficial for the students of BTech 4th year. Now, before we start about the resource provisioning, we should know the certain terms related to the resource provisioning, from where that particular word came. So before that, we have to start with the first term, that is called as the, before we start with the first term, that is intercloud. If I'm talking about the term intercloud, the idea behind an intercloud is that there is a common single functionality platform in which we can combine the different individuals on the clouds, and which is being seems to be like a single one, right? And whatever the operations is to be performed, that should be based on demand. So it will be very helpful for thinking about or existing of the cloud computing steps to set up the design in the common platform. So this is about an intercloud. So in the case of intercloud, we should know there is intercloud resource management, because once we have created a intercloud means when we are creating a common platform, or you can say a single common functionality, right? So in that case, what we have to do, we have to talk about the resource management. In the case of resource management, how all the services is being given, or how all the services is being performed, like how we will do the resource discovery. If we are having an ample of resources, how we have to discover, right? Then after that, how we can match the resources as per the need of the customers. Then after that, we have to select the matched resources, and finally we will do the composition of all the resources which we will provide to the customers. Then finally, once we have do the composition of all the resources, then we can do the negotiation with our customers regarding the money or regarding the financial patterns, right? And once we are doing the negotiation and we are getting satisfied with their customers, and customers are satisfied with the composition of the resources and so on, then finally we will do the scheduling and monitoring all the operations, how we can do the resources provisioning management. Then after that, you can see when I'm talking about the taxonomy of the intercloud resource management, in which the first parameter is resource provisioning. In this lecture, we are going to discuss about the complete method, how the resource provisioning works, right? Under the resource provisioning, we are going to talk about the two terms. First is discovery and the second is selection. It means, I can give you a basic example. For example, if you are searching anything on a Google, right? So what you are doing it, if you are writing Google pay that www.xyz.com, right? Yeah, if you are using a term, any term like xyz, so according to that term, you will get an ample number of files. You will be discover all the files, and out of all the files, what you are doing it, you are selecting the limited files which is being required as per your need, right? So it means you will do the selection of the limited files. This is the working pattern of resource provisioning. Then after that, we can talk about the second management, that is the resource scheduling. Resource scheduling means whatever the resources we are providing, may or may not be those resources can be available or provided to the other customers also. So into that case, what we have to do, we have to do the resource scheduling, so that we can there is no tie up between the two customers and there is no clashes being generated. So in that, we are going to talk about allocation and mapping, how we have to talk about the providing of all those resources. And the last term is resource monitoring. Whatever the resources is being allocated, how the mapping is being done, how the operations is being performed, and how the resources is being used by the user. Then in that parameter, we are going to talk about the resource monitoring, right? So this is a taxonomy for the intercloud resource management. Though on the basis of that, because in this lecture we are going to discuss about the one topic, that is a resource provisioning. Fine. So in the case of resource provisioning, what do you mean by the term resource provisioning? Basically, resource provisioning means the selection, deployment, and the runtime management of all the softwares and the hardware resources, which should give a guarantee that we will provide the better performance for applications. So if I'm talking about selection, deployment and runtime management in the terms of hardware and software, suppose if I'm using the word software, in the case of software we are talking about the database management servers and systems, or how the load is being balanced, right? But if I'm talking about the CPU, storage, network areas, how the network connectivity is being provided, this is all terms come under the hardware resource provisioning. Once remember one thing, when I'm talking about the resource provisioning, generally we are using the word of SLAs, because whenever we are providing the services to the cloud users, we always sign an agreement between with the users. So in that case we are going to talk about the concept of SLA, service level agreements. Basically this is the one agreement, or you can say this is an initial agreement between the cloud users and the cloud service providers, which not only gives the guarantee for the quality of services, but also gives a guarantee that we will provide a better reliability, response time, performance and availability as per the need of customers requirements, or as per the need of cloud users. Now on the various applications, generally we need to provide the static provisioning and dynamic provisioning, or you can say we are talking about the static and dynamic allocation of the resources also. So in that case, when I'm talking about the resources allocation or provisioning, so we have to maintain the quality of services parameters, and simultaneously we are also think about that we should not violate the service level agreement. Whatever the agreement we are signing it, we should not violate the rules and regulations too. Now if I'm talking about the resource provisioning, there are the three types of resource provisioning. The first is static provisioning. The static provisioning means which is being fixed initially. Before providing the resources, it is being fixed, and it should be things like predictable and unchangeable demands. Just for example, if the two users are signing to each other, whatever the demands they have, they are initially written into the service level agreements, and whatever their demands is to be unchanged. Second thing, whatever the resources they are required, they have to prepare a report, or they have to prepare in advance in the terms of list, right? And simultaneously they have to charge even based on the monthly basis or on a based of flat fees. Why? Because all the resources they are allocating initially, right? If it is being allocated initially, so it means what happened, their resources is being fixed, their demands are to be fulfilled, and on the basis of that they have generated the bills. So in spite of paying on regular basis or on demand, it is better to pay a fee on a flat fee or on a monthly basis. Then after that we are going to talk about the dynamic provisioning. Dynamic provisioning means, dynamic word means with change on demand, right? So we can say whenever I'm talking about on demand, it means the demand of the various applications may be changed according to the need. Whenever the user requires, it changes their demand, right? And whenever they are demanding it, we have to allocate their resources on their requirements. So we can say whenever we are allocating the more and more resources, whenever they are needed, and when once their need is fulfilled, then we can easily remove it whenever they are not in use. So this is the way we are talking about the demand provisioning. Similarly, in the case of fee payment, whatever the resources they are using it, they have to pay for it. Means whatever they are using it, they have to pay for it, right? The next is user provisioning. User provisioning means these all are those types of resources which is being purchased in the form of web form, creating an account and users. It means they have already created their accounts onto the users platform, on the service providers platform, and they can use their resources at any amount of time, right? Now if I'm talking about the certain parameters, after that we are going to discuss about the parameters. There are the certain parameters which plays a very important role for the resource provisioning, under which the first parameter we are going to discuss about the response time. If I'm talking about the response time, suppose if I'm using the word response time, suppose this is a client and this is a server, right? If the client requests for anything and response generated by the server within a given time, then that particular execution is called as response time. You can see the term also in the case of resource provisioning algorithms. We can design the minimal time to respond when the execution the task, right? And the next term is minimizing the cost. If I'm using the word minimizing the cost, it means if I'm talking about from the cloud users point of view, we always expect that whatever the resources is being provided to us, it should be in a minimal cost, it should be on a cheapest form, right? So that is why we are talking about the resource provisioning to get it into a minimum cost. The next is revenue maximization. We know that there are when we are creating an intercloud, right? So in the case of intercloud, there are certain service providers who always provide the services just for the revenue purpose, for the profit purpose, right? So that whenever they are providing the resources to their users, they will get the maximum revenue, right? The next is fault tolerance. If I'm talking about the fault tolerance, it means somewhere term related to the failure of nodes, right? So in this case, if I'm talking about resource provisioning, this algorithm should continue to provide the services to the users in spite of failing of nodes. Suppose there is a large network and into that network some of the nodes is being failed, right? So into that case, what happened? If the nodes is being failed, it will not create an impact onto the rest of the network. So we can say if the certain number of nodes is to be failed, it will not make any impact onto the system, and rest of the network or rest of the algorithm will works in a similar pattern. Then next is reduced the SLA violation. Basically this particular algorithm is being designed to reduce the SLA's violation, because as I have already told you, like if we are preparing a report, right, if we are providing the services to any of the cloud users, so initially we have to sign an agreement, and into that agreement everything is to be written, right? So when we are signing, both the parties are signing the agreement, so it is already being given into the system that how we have to talk about the network. So simultaneously nobody is interested to violate all those rules. The next is reduced the power consumption. If I'm talking about the reduced power consumption, we know that we are talking about a virtual machines, right? So when we are creating a virtual environment in which we are providing the services to one after another user, right? In which the one user can migrate from one user cloud service provider to the other also, right? So in that case, there is a low power consumption, fine. Now, if I'm talking about the provisioning of compute resources, you can check basically the cloud emphasizes on the number of virtual instances, how all those virtual instances is being created, and whosoever is a supply service providers, they always sign the SLAs with their users so that they can provide a better functionalities, better quality of service parameters, like they can provide you enough CPU, they can provide you enough storage space, and simultaneously the network bandwidth. So unto that cases, we are going to talk about the two terms. The first is under provisioning and the second is over provisioning. When I'm using the word under provisioning means leads to broken the SLA and penalties, right? It means whosoever is leading to broke the SLA, service level agreements, and once either a user or a service provider, whosoever will break the agreement, they have to undergo the penalty, right? And the second is I'm talking about an over provisioning. Basically over provisioning means lead to the resource underutilization, right? Whatever the resources is being provided, we are not utilizing in a better way, or either we are utilizing in a very high range as per our demands. So this is a two terms, over provisioning and under provisioning. Now you can check the two conditions of under provisioning. First of all, if I'm talking about the peak load in the case of provisioning, now you can see the graph. Suppose there is a capacity of providing the resources and this is the demand, right? So whatever the resources is being demanding, it should be always within the limit of the capacity of the user, right? The second term comes as under provisioning first condition. Suppose if the capacity of the user is this and it goes always beyond the demand, right? Whatever their demand is, it always goes beyond to that cases, right? And the third case is, if I'm talking about in this case, sometimes their demand is being increased, sometimes it is low, sometimes it is very high, or sometimes it is up to the capacity only, right? So these are the three cases when I'm talking about the resource provisioning without elasticity. So the first case is heavy wastage due to the over provisioning. Why? Because in this case you can see whenever we are required the resources, it is somewhere is to be wasted into the number of days also, right? And so on. Now if I'm talking about the resource provisioning methods, there are the three basic methods. The first is demand driven method, the second is event driven method, and the third is popularity driven method, right? From the initial words like demand, event and popularity, it is being clear that what type of a method we are talking about. So first of all, we are going to discuss about the demand provisioning. If I'm using the word demand provisioning, in the case of demand provisioning, it means you can easily add or remove the computing instances based on the current utilization for the level of allocated resources. How we are allocating the resources? Whenever the user demand for the resources, then we can add it, and once their demand is fulfilled or the resources are of no use, we can easily remove the instances. So this is called as a demand driven. The second, we are talking about an event driven. Event driven matlab which is being provided for a specific time of an event, right? Just for example, if I'm talking about a peak traffic before it happens, right? So we can anticipates this particular scheme, right? So we can say it is called as an event driven. In the case of event driven, you can read that add and remove the resources based on the specific time event. Whenever there is a time event is being occur, we can provide the services, and once their event is fulfilled or completed, then you can take the resources back or you can remove the resources, right? The next is popularity driven. Popularity means famous, means which is being coming again and again by searching the applications, which is in being demand. Just for example, if you are searching anything on Google, right, and maximum number of users are using that particular application or website again and again for doing the work, so it means it is in popular demand, right? So if it is in a popularity, so it always shows in a upper list of that particular demand, right? Now this is all about the resource provisioning. Under the resource provisioning, the first term comes out to be GCX. This is called as a global exchange of cloud resources. How we are providing the network services on a one single platform, so that we can exchange all the network and services to the users and so on. So under that term, the first term comes as to be global exchange of cloud resources. The global exchange, it is also called as GCX. Basically, the GCX provides the network services for enterprises, new media providers and telecom carriers. Means it is being providing a cloud centric connectivity among the SD-WAN and hybrid networks, in which we can provide the direct connections to the cloud, and generally it will provide the 100 Gbps plus waves into that system, right? Basically, if I'm talking about the GCX, it provides the connectivity throughput for emerging the markets corridor, so that we can create the largest submarine cable network, and with the expansion of that we can connect the countries worldwide, so that we can exchange the services providers can provide the various services, they can work for the enterprises and so on, right? If I'm talking about the service providers, there are the certain limitations for the service providers. The first of all, they have to be inflexible in pricing. Why they have to be inflexible in pricing? Because there is a lot of competition into the marketplace, right? Into that competition, what happens? Everybody is demanding for the prices, right? So suppose if the user is getting, suppose they are going to the market and purchasing certain things and they are getting into a lesser price, so obviously they will go towards that place, right? So into that case what happens, we have to be flexible into the prices, right? But in the case of service providers, we have to be inflexible. Why? Because if every cloud service provider, they are to be fixed, so we have to be getting the better quality of services towards domain. The second is consumers are restricted to offering from a single provider at a time, right? And the next is no standard interface. So there is no fixed interface into it, that we always have to follow the certain interface only. And the next is unable to swap from one provider to another, because once we have signed the agreements with the first provider of with the one provider, you cannot again and again changes that, like आज मैं इससे ले लेता हूँ, कल मैं उससे, and so on. No, into that parameters will not work onto it, right? The next we are going to talk about the global cloud exchange. If I'm talking about the global cloud exchange, there are the various ways. The first is market directory. Market directory provides the complete details about the market peoples, that you can go through it, how they are providing their prices, what are their commodities, and so on. So what all services they can provide it. So we are having a complete directory that is provided into the cloud global market exchange. We are having a banking systems also. We are having a brokers. We are having an admission control mechanism. The admission control mechanism says, suppose there is a one network or there is a one cloud service provider. If they are already having a n number of users, which is their capacity to provide the services, so into that case it will not take any admission, it will not accept the any cloud users, because their platform is to be fulfilled. So that is called as an admission control. Then I'm talking about the consumers utility function, resource management, proxy, and so on. So these all are the terms which is related to the global cloud exchange. Now you can see the complete global exchange market, right? Into this market, we are having a one cloud in which we are having a services auction also placed in place. Global service registry is being available, and this is the complete n number of cloud service providers who have created their own environment, market environment, to provide the various services. There are certain private clouds, personal public clouds is being available. Now you can see there are the certain private clouds are also attached with the main cloud, that they are generating their own network within their organization, and they are connecting with the public clouds also, so that they can provide the some public cloud services also. So suppose there is a one client which is being related to the end user, and then after that it is being taking the services from the cloud exchange, and it will go to the n number of cloud service providers, so that they can get the better facilities and so on. Now if I'm talking about the global cloud exchange, then obviously there is a lot of challenges for it. The first is unwillingly to shift from traditional controlled environments. Basically we are used to that we have to be follow the traditional method, right? So into that system, but we have to go under to a service level agreements. We have to sign the agreements, and we have to follow the certain rules and regulations. So somewhere it is like very difficult to shift from a traditional control environment to that particular restricted areas, right? The next is regulatory pressure. Why it is a regulatory pressure? Because whosoever is providing the services, again and again they are having a lot of pressure that abhi isko dena hai, then uske baad we have to do this thing, then that, and so on. So we are having a lot of pressure. We have to maintain the scheduling, we have to check the monitoring parameters, and so on, right? And the next is how to obtain the restitution in case of an SLA violation. Suppose if the two peoples out of the two, one is violating the rules and regulations, how we can accept that violations, how that particular violation works, we have to think about that parameter too, right? Then after that, if I'm working in a global security exchange and global cloud exchange, then into that case we are talking about the security, and security plays a very important role when I'm talking about the cloud computing. Cloud computing security says it is a set of policies, controls, procedures, technologies, that all is to be work together to protect the cloud-based system and their infrastructure and to their data. Whenever the services is being delivered upon an individual, the cloud service providers or the cloud service security solution, we always think about the security. Now, if I'm talking about the security, these all are the challenges which we need to think about the security, like data loss, hacked interface and APIs. There is a data breach, or you can say hacking of certain data in between. There is a vendor lock-in problem can come. There are any types of attack can be occur. There may be an account hijacking. There is a misconfiguration can be possible. There is an accidental exposure and so on. There is a lot of challenges for maintaining the security onto the open, private or public networks. So first of all, I am going to talk about the security risks. The first is a distributed denial of service. Distributed denial of service, and when I'm talking about a cloud platforms, everything is to be largely unthinkable, right? Whenever we are providing the resources to the cloud service providers, it is very extremely difficult to initiate, right? How we have to provide the services, how we have to generate the list of resources to the providers. So somewhere when we are generating the complete list, entire list, we are finding a lot of difficulties. The second, we are going to talk about the shared cloud computing services. As we have already told you that not all the host solutions, not all the host cloud computing solutions and cloud computing services are equal, right? Each and every is being providing the services or leading the resources as per the client's requirements. So there is an impact on sharing the resources also, that sometimes we are providing a more resources to the other clients in comparison to the other ones. The next is employees negligence. If I'm using the word employees negligence, basically this is one of the biggest problem with the employees, that employee negligence and employee mistakes remain one of the biggest security issues, but the threat in particular is dangerous with the cloud solutions. So basically we have to log into the cloud solutions from their mobile phones or from the tablets or home PCs, and somewhere they are creating a vulnerable threats into the outside networks, right? The next is we are talking about the data loss and inadequacy backups. When I'm talking about data loss, somewhere there is a cyber security, we are required to encrypt the files, but somewhere if we are not locking the systems or we are providing an improper synchronization of that data, so somewhere there is a very chances for the data loss, and inadequate backups can be taken place. So backup is the only solution, and company no needs to longer to pay for all these threats. The next is phishing and social engineering attacks. If I'm talking about, because phishing and social engineering, as we all know that there is an openness system in the case of cloud computing, so we can say phishing and social engineering attack is a very common thing, right? Because generally we are trying to log in the information or any other confidential information is to be, and when there is a malicious user comes into the system with the ease, they, as the system itself is available from anywhere, because what happens into that case, they have login through the mobile phones also, home tablets also, desktops also, and so on. So into that case there is a lot of chances for phishing and social engineering attacks. The next we are going to talk about the system vulnerabilities. System vulnerabilities basically especially generates in the networks that have a complex infrastructures, or when we are having a multiple third party platforms, because we are more dependent onto the third party, and once the vulnerability comes into the system, it will be easily used against the organizations. They can protect the patching and upgrade their protocols, right? So this is a system vulnerability. The next is data breach. When I'm talking about a data breach, it results an attack or employee's negligence or an error due to which the data can be breached or data can be leaked from their laptops, from their mobile phones. Just generally what happens, like if we are working into an office and we forgot to log in our system, log out our system, or to put the system in our sleep mode, then what happens? Someone can come and they can check your data and so on. They can share their data, right? The next is account hijacking. If I'm talking about the account hijacking, It means somewhere we know that in adoption of the cloud services, some of the attackers, they are using the employees login information to access the insensitive information. So into that case, what happens, the attackers can modify, insert the false information and manipulate the data present in the cloud, right? The next is insecure APIs and interfaces. Sometimes when I'm talking about the customer's point of view, there are certain characteristics of the APIs which can enter into the back doors and corrupt the systems and affect the security or the availability of the cloud services and the platforms. The next is insider threat. If I'm talking about an insider threat, basically insider threat means it is the misuse of the information through the hostile intent, malware, and even the accidents can occur. Insider threats basically are system administrators or the employees from that particular organization, those who can access the confidential information and they can access into the systems and eventually the data also. This is what we are talking about, the insider threats. Now this is a complete architecture for, I'm talking about the security challenges, because we know we are dividing the cloud computing into the three networks like public, private and hybrid. So these all are the problems or security challenges when we are talking about three clouds. If I'm talking in terms of service models like IaaS, PaaS and SaaS, so into that forms these all are the security challenges. And when I'm talking about the network issues, these are the various security challenges which can be come under into the problems. Now there are the various security challenges which is to be deployed models are to be discussed here. First is cloning and resource pooling. When I'm using the word cloning means data leakage problems or generating a replicated or duplicated data, right? So into this problem, resource pooling is a services in which we are sharing the resources among the various users and according to their applications demand. So into that, due to the sharing of the same resources on the same network, there may be an unauthorized access can be possible, right? The next is motility of data and data residuals. When I'm talking about the motility of data and data residuals, it means basically we are talking about the best uses of resources in the cloud infrastructures, and the residue, we are talking about an errors. We are adding the errors into that data, residuals, right? The next we are talking about an elastic parameter. Elastic parameter, basically we are talking about in comprising of private clouds in which we can create an elastic parameter in which the various department and the users throughout the organization allow of sharing of different resources which can increase the facility of access, but somewhere unfortunately it leads to the data breach problem. The next is shared the multi-tenant environment. When I'm using the word multi-tenant environment, in the case of multi-tenant environment, when we are creating a multi-tenant means n number of tenants can be available and all the consumers is not able to access all the resources into an unequal amount of resources, right? So we can say we are talking about a shared multi-tenant environment. The next we are talking about an encrypted data. Suppose we are exchanging the data between the two systems and it is in an encrypted form. It can be easily accessed by the unauthorized users. The next we are talking about an authentication and identity management. When I'm talking about identity management, which helps in authenticating the users through their credentials, right? Thank you.